Mark, good morning. Hello, how are you?
Well, I'm pretty glad to be down here on the southern tip of Africa, given what's happening
Okay.
in the Middle East and other places. I mean, this is sort of real war, hey?
Yep.
Khamenei, he is now dead, and there's this new guy, Arafi, who's in his place, and one can expect retaliation upon retaliation, and as the war, if you want to call it that, because I think that's almost what it is. As it escalates,
Right.
so new partnerships and new landing zones and protection zones and drone launch pads and all of these things come into play. So it's not a happy place, eh? I mean, your thing about sell Bitcoin, buy gold turned out to be prophetic. I mean, did you do it? That's the question. Did you actually do it?
I did the sell the Bitcoin part, but I didn't do the buy the gold part.
No, Tim, man. No.
Oh,
You did the little
man.
boy stuff. Come on, man. Come on. Anyway, what is your take
It's
on all
a
of this?
completely new, it's a completely new scenario. I mean, and everybody that you read about it says more or less the same thing, which is that there are multiple possible outcomes here. Some of which are good and some of which are really bad. Trump has underlined his approach to these things, which is just to do something that he decided to do 5 minutes ago. That's the kind of impression that you get.
That is deeply considered.
Yeah. It's not impossible that something quite good could come out of it. If there is, a sort of different regime change in Iran, that would be, this is the cradle of civilization.
Well, on that,
fantastic outcome. Yeah.
On that, I mean, there's a little bit of an internal war going on there. There are people celebrating and there are people mourning, all in the same street, kind of thing. Okay, I mean,
yeah, exactly,
I don't know if you've seen some of the coverage, and so it's a bit of it's divisory by whatever metric you choose to adopt. And so it's not good. And I do sit back and reflect on the purpose of war and who drives war and in whose interest is war, and I can't come up with any useful answers, Tim. I don't like war. Okay.
Yeah.
So it's uncivilized, man. Yeah.
No,
anyway, enough on the war.
Yeah. Can I just make one last point quickly?
Yeah.
I just read something which really kind of struck a chord with me, and that was about how unsuccessful war has been over the last century. If you think about and it almost makes no difference who launched it. If the country doing the launching was a democracy and or the country launching it was a autocratic regime. In almost all cases, the wars have been unsuccessful, almost from the Vietnam War onwards. I think that it says something about the nature of conflict. In the past, big countries could just overwhelm small countries.
And take them over and adopt them and rule them.
Yeah, and then they would become
those days are over.
Vassal states. Yeah. And that doesn't happen so much anymore. So I mean, I don't know what Putin thinks about his war in Ukraine, but I think objectively, to gain 2% in physical territory in 2 years. At the cost of, we think, 1 million people injured and killed, that's not success by my standards.
No, but it's also centered around increasingly individuals. If you were to say, who's the war between? Well, forget about the nationality, the countries they represent. It's Zelensky, it's Trump, it's Putin, it's Netanyahu. You can get 5 of them in a room, and you go, why don't you guys hire a room and go and beat each other up? Okay, and leave us alone. Why don't you guys go away for the weekend, and we'll see who comes back. Well, I know who'd come back. Yeah. Anyway, let's not make light of it. In the real world, there's an extraordinary amount of suffering going on there. They're people, without shelter and food and water and stuff, and all because of allegiances and egos and things of that nature. I'm saddened by these things. I would have thought, as a civilized society, we could have these wars diplomatically and technologically instead of physically. Anyway, maybe there's a whole big defense industry. I love the way we call this defense, though. I mean, that's my best.
Yes, no,
okay.
Exactly.
We're building our defense capability. Okay. Yes, all right. I don't want to make small of it. It's horrible.
Yep.
Tim, back home a bit. We've just had the budget. Everyone seems to be in a good mood about the budget. I'm a bit as well. How are you?
Okay. I'm, one doesn't like necessarily to brag about one's predictions and everything, but I was.
Goodness me, it won't be the last. Yeah, no, go for it, Tim. I mean, the thing that irritates me most about your prediction is that you always get them right. Okay, you should become a sage. You should start investing people's money. Yeah. What did you predict, Tim? Go on.
So last week I said, my prediction was that this budget would go through very easily, that everybody would sort of like applaud from the sidelines, and that it really wouldn't do or say much beyond holding the fort, and sort of marginally increasing things. So then that happened, right? But actually now that it has happened, I'm not so happy anymore.
No more. No, I mean, let me go back to these predictions. I was the Mr. Butt at our last discussion on the anticipatory discussion on the budget, when I said, but they haven't solved anything, as it were. We've still got debt to GDP closer to 80 than 60. And I'm reminded of the fact that the last time South African bonds were rated investment grade, there was a slip. Investment grade.
Oopsie.
Yeah, oops, what a slip. Investment grade, our debt to GDP ratio was 50%. It's now tending towards 80, and it don't look like it's coming home anytime soon. And so some of the things, and it looks to me, Tim, every day we discover another corrupt flow of money. And it's unabated. I don't think we've even scratched the surface, and yet we've destroyed so much value.
Yeah, I mean, I think the big picture behind the budget is broadly this. We have reached a debt to GDP level which is so high that actually government is incapable of launching any big new program. So just before the budget, the NHI was put on hold, technically speaking, because there's, court cases against it. But the real reason here, is that we just don't know how much it's going to cost, but we do know it's going to cost an absolutely enormous amount, and we don't have it now. So everybody's sort of like, not looking there, not talking about it, and a little bit happy that there's court cases taking place so that we could say, no, it's on hold. So we haven't scrapped it. It's on hold.
Yeah, but
the fact is, sorry, carry on.
We should be cautious on focusing on debt as the enemy. Debt's not an enemy. It's what you do with the money that creates an enemy. Okay, so we've got lots of debt, no assets. That's the conundrum. Okay, so you're like, okay, we've borrowed all this money. What have we done with it? Have we built extraordinary industrial parks but we haven't, is the short answer.
Yes.
Okay, and so that's the real issue. We borrowed with nothing to show for it, and what we're doing now beyond borrowing is, and we've said this before, but I'll repeat it very quickly. We're relying on a diminishing and aging tax base to fund an unemployed youth and social obligations. Add those things together, and you really have to, at some point, if this was a company, we'd have a rights issue. We need capital.
Yeah. I mean, it's not only, I think, that, that our asset base is sort of diminished. It's also that our interest rates on that debt are very high. There's lots of countries around the world who have a higher debt to GDP rate than we do.
Oh, exactly.
But, they are paying almost nothing for their debt. And we are paying $1 billion a week, a little bit more than $1 billion a week. So, and that makes a big difference. So it's great that interest rates come down. They've given the Treasury a little bit of leeway. It means that the Treasury is able to, give very modest tax concessions, make very modest tax concessions. All good. And the aim is to stabilize debt and to bring it down. Also, all good. They had a few ideas in the budget, but to me they just strike me as very modest. For example,
they are modest. They're pieces, crowd of pieces.
Yeah. So, for example, and there are many of these examples. They increased the tax-free retirement savings account. So you can put a little bit more money every year into it. Okay. But it's only by about 5,000 Rand extra.
Yeah.
And the cap remains. So the cap remains at, the most that you could have in your tax-free savings account is 500,000 Rand. And you can't retire on that. I mean, you could, some people are going to be forced to, but generally speaking, it's very difficult to survive on 4,000 Rand a month.
Yeah.
And will be increasingly. Yeah. So that's my overall take.
Yeah. So we are, we're building acceptable, we're staying the inevitable instead of addressing it. Okay. Because this is the trouble with governments that then move on, is that it's not, after a couple more years, it's not their problem. Okay. But structurally, no one's prepared to take the pain. And, we won't get out of this until we start building things and making revenue and enlarging. Anyway, we're going on like a stuck gramophone because it is stuck. And these little sweeties that we're getting aren't going to give us anything more. They're not going to cure our sugar insulin problem, which is what we've really got to deal with. These analogies are getting a little far-fetched. Tim, it was a comforting budget, but that comfort is misplaced if you understand the depth of our challenges that are still ahead of us. That's my sort of conclusion on it. Anyway, that's
there's one other thing that I just quickly like to raise, and that is about the idea, government's central idea. The government's central idea right through until the Ramaphosa era was radical economic transformation. That was the in some ways that was the chorus. That was the sort of instant summary. The new big idea is public-private partnerships. And in principle, I think that's a very good idea. But the problem is that it's, even if business wanted to engage in a public-private partnership, you need the public side to not be a corpse. You need the public side to be alive and well and kicking, and and it seems to me that's not enough work has gone into making sure that these zombie organizations become actually fruitful. I mean, some in crisis situations, some work has been done on that, and there have been improvements. Great. But generally speaking, I would like to see them more alive and more kicking.
Well, the trouble with inept management is it sees itself permanently under siege. So it never sees itself never sees change as a solution, because change means the end of my employment, typically. And so we've got to find a place of intersecting common interest where we go please do this. It's going to make sense in the long term. And there are going to be some changes of authority here. And you are going to get some people coming in here that make you feel less comfortable with what you're doing. But in the long term, your children and all of us are going to benefit from this. And that's the challenge. The challenge is that the people in charge will feel threatened by the private sector instead of encouraged by them, because the gap is so wide. And so we have to, and what's the missing ingredient, Tim? It's leadership. Someone's got to go gather, guys. I want you guys to gather in the room and understand the common purpose and the consequences of not following that. And everyone needs to be convinced that I've got to give a little. And the same criticism can be leveled at the private sector. We think we know everything and we everything to everybody. We're not. We've got to live in the reality of our country and its demographics and other dynamics. And so we also have to come to the party and go, okay, slowly. We're going to do this, but we're going to compensate with that and so on. And it's that missing middle, that missing intersection, which is there and manifest by the absence of leadership. And I'm sorry, but I look across all political parties and I find us a bit short on that.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah.
So I think that's.
Can I just give you one example of this? Which it's a small thing, but it's. The city of Cape Town has decided to sell off 60 properties.
I saw that.
And they did that. They announced an auction, and that very odd building, which is just on the verges of Cape Town, which is the little sports center that was built years ago. Called the Good Hope Center, is one of the buildings that they sold. But then there was a big outrage about this. And it's something struck me when I looked at all of that, because I think what the Cape Town municipality is doing is absolutely right. They're looking at their property portfolio and they're saying, this is the stuff we don't need. We can't do anything with this. Let's see if somebody else can do something with it. And strangely enough, one of the properties I noticed was an empty plot in Clifton. So I don't know how they got that. But to me,
I don't know how they still have it, actually.
I know, exactly. That's right. I mean, selling it seems to me a completely sensible thing to do. But no, there was a big outrage, not just from the ANC, but from all of the other parties as well, on the basis that the DA, that there wasn't enough social housing. But to me, it was so full of oppose. People were adopting oppose, and because actually the DA does have a social housing program, quite a big one, and actually they've got a prize from it. So it's strange to me how politicians don't recognize when another politician does a good thing. Yeah. Sorry, I'm going on.
You're looking in the wrong place, man. You're looking for commercial logic in political discourse. Okay. I'm sorry. I've been doing this for 10 years. I've been involved in these kinds of discussions. It's absent. There is no intersection whatsoever. Okay. When you look for succession, when you look for commercial logic versus political will, all of these kinds of things, there's no intersection. And it has to be grabbed by the scruff of its neck, this country, and we have to wring out a solution that works. Okay. And absent that, if we appease one another forever, and if we keep on slating one party against the other instead of issue, against solution, against problem, we will just be in this conundrum. And thank goodness I'm old enough to just at some point not care about it in 10 years' time. I won't know where Clifton is or something. Okay. Anyway, but the real consequences also happen. So I was looking at SPAR. SPAR is now worth less than it was 16 years ago. That's quite if you adjust that for real value of money and all that sort of thing, what happens in a country where you're entering into a debt spiral is it starts eliminating the weakest players. Slowly but surely, across all sectors, we're going to see the demise of the weakest players because there isn't enough for everybody. So instead of 5 major retailers, we're going to have 3. Instead of 10 banks, we're going to have 4. And so it's going to diminish. And that feeds back into the unemployment loop and the social need and the whatever. And so we are starting to see the signs in the real private capital world of the consequences of a diminishing economy in real terms. Yeah. And that's what will really happen. It will be beyond public sector spend and ineptitude. It'll eventually, if there's not enough, the economy isn't big enough to accommodate the population which keeps growing regardless. And that's our real challenge. Anyway, going on a bit, Tim, this is, we're going to move on now. This is sadly our last podcast on News 24. Hey?
Yeah, I just, it's entirely my fault. I was a bit of a free agent, and now I'm working for a media organization, and I just don't feel comfortable with working for two media organizations simultaneously. So I'm afraid we have to say goodbye, and just thanks very much for following us.
Thank you.
Somewhere else, somehow, somewhere. But it's just been a kind of pleasure, and really, can I just say very sincerely thanks to all of the people on News 2024 for allowing us to use their platform
on your platform,
and help us with the video and doing all of the editing and stuff. It's just been great. Thank you.
It has been great. We've had something, the exact number is before today, 77,830 of you guys have listened to us. Pretty impressed with that.
Yeah.
And we're having fun. So Tim and I are going to gather and pop up in another form, and we hope you'll find us there. We look forward to it. And so far, so good. Thank you very much. And guys, have a lovely week. It's March.
Yeah, absolutely. It's March. It's March already.
March already.
Marching forward. Thanks, Mark. Thanks, Amol.
Okay.
Cheers.
Okay.
Bye.
Ciao.